Why is this, man? Obama and Democrats are always allowed to berate and chastise corporations like ExxonMobil for 2 quarters of record profits, $11 billion worth per quarter, when that, in turn, translates into record levels of corporate tax revenue collection. $32 billion, in fact, per quarter to the IRS from ExxonMobil to the U.S. government, for a total of $64 billion from this one company. I mean, what's wrong with that? I mean, all these senators or the congressmen, the Democrats that are bitching about it, they're the ones who freaking get to spend the money. And it's still not enough. The way that Democrats view the role of government within the economic sphere is as a virtual consolidated corporate conglomerate in itself, engaged in competition with privately held companies, such as yours and mine, involved in a wide array of industries, supposedly to protect the national interests and supposedly to fulfill its constitutional obligation to promote the general welfare or some such. Simultaneously, the government is capable of regulating those same privately held companies. However, in addition to competing in the free market with privately held companies, this corporate government entity holds exclusively the advantage of legal authority to judge its own competition as being too large, and therefore able to knock them down to size and even force them to break up into smaller companies, all in the name of antitrust and preventing monopolies, which they say could control prices by being the only guy in town where you can buy a certain commodity thing or get a certain service. The benevolent government says it must do these things in the interest of fairness and creating a level playing field. All the while, the government is able to gain monopolistic power for itself and keep itself out of reach of regulations it enforces on private companies. Democrats view themselves as the ones most capable of being in an executive leadership of this immense corporate / governing entity, this living, consuming behemoth that has no real discipline that it must follow and has no budget to which it must adhere and no necessity to even be profitable in order that it might survive. It is simply a given that it must survive and will, because it is the government. It holds eminent domain overall, in the end anyway, and whatever it feels that it is in need of, it has the authority to acquire by any means necessary, including raising your taxes, which, as Ayn Rand pointed out in her book Atlas Shrugged, that really means the government can simply put a gun to your head and take your money. Remember Bill Clinton and Al Gore and all the big-time Democrat players of the modern day like to employ catchphrases like investing in America. What they really mean by that is pay taxes to our nationalized industries, employing a staggering amount of union labor, run compassionately, if not inexpensively, for your overall benefit by us, the socialists. We're good people. Seems like most people don't appear to suspect or even care. Maybe they think it's a good thing, having been indoctrinated their whole lives about the evil deeds of greedy corporations like Halliburton, run by evil, greedy, selfish, wicked Republicans who would sacrifice their children for oil, contrasted with the inherent goodness and angelic likeness of the Democrats. Republican philosophy tries to adhere largely to the concept of free markets, which nobody pays attention really because it seems boring. Business is boring. The nuts and bolts of the stock market, the general mechanisms and machinations of commodities, industry, and services, largely based in science and physics and engineering. The technology sector is viewed by many as being sort of geeky. Free market works in the background, takes care of all your needs without raising a fuss about it. You take it largely for granted that your eggs are going to be at the supermarket. Everyone in a free market is basically content. Whatever they need can be acquired because somebody finds it worthwhile to sell such a thing that others desire. This is the concept of supply and demand. Most people in a free market society are in an upward moving financial status, and those who are not, it is largely the consequence of their poor decision making or laziness or ignorance. Free market philosophies are largely dependent upon people who rise to a challenge, are driven, are inspired, people who have a vision to carry out those ends that they visualize. In other words, they have a dream. Will ever notice how somebody's really good at doing something? For instance, they make really good chili, and their friends will say, "Man, you make the best chili. You ought to start your own chili company. You ought to open up a restaurant. You ought to start a business of some kind and sell your chili." And if you ask these people, "Why don't you start a business?" they will say that they don't want to lose their ass. They're afraid to start a business because it's so risky. Kind of a paradox that has always confounded me. Employees often steal from their companies that they work for. Things like soap or towels or some kind of consumable item that the company buys in bulk in order to do whatever it does, and the employees just feel that they have the right to steal that. And they justify it by saying, "Oh, you know, my boss, he's a rich businessman, he won't miss it if I take these towels or light bulbs or supplies or use the company car for personal business." They often talk down about their bosses because they're greedy rich businessmen who don't do anything and make lots of money for not doing it. The employees of this rich, lazy businessman feel like they are the ones who are really carrying the company. Very well be a valued employee, but they are by no means irreplaceable. The American dream is the example to the world. Everyone seeks to emulate our free market system because it is largely based upon just what is and making the best of it instead of trying to adjust it by means of an authority that has less knowledge of whatever it seeks to authorize or prohibit by means of its own poor judgment. It is the plight, however, of the quote-unquote downtrodden in a free market society that is highlighted as the major fault of a free market system and or the Republican ideology. And because of the downtrodden, the uneducated, the unskilled, the uninterested, the apathetic, the addicted, that their message is broadcast far and wide by the Democrats and most of the media. America is a terrible place, and so many wrongs have to be righted. This has come to a crisis. Everybody who hears and is doing good, but could be doing better, or those who feel they are doing too much and would like to be doing less, yet still receive a reward from somewhere for their mediocrity, and those who are doing absolutely nothing and don't want to start doing anything all get together to take what they have been led to believe they deserve from those who have.